Do you always glare at the man who's trying to save your life? Samuel Cross's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, like a steel cable pulled just tight enough to hum. The dim light inside the Hartley Tower elevator flickered again, washing his face in alternating bands of shadow and pale gold. Across from him, Ariel Hartley's jaw tensed, her arms crossed like she was shielding herself from more than the cold draft seeping through the shaft. "I didn't ask for your help," she said. Her tone was cool, but her eyes flicked to the control panel, then to the door, both stubbornly unyielding. "And I don't glare. I assess. Yeah." Samuel crouched beside the panel, his toolbox already open. "Then, assess this. You're stuck between the 15th and 16th floors, the motor's whining like a dog left out in the snow, and the backup system's about 30 seconds from quitting on us. You still want me to keep my hands in my pockets?" The elevator shuddered, making the overhead lights swing like a lazy pendulum. Somewhere deep in the walls, gears clanged, followed by a groan that didn't sound entirely mechanical. Ariel's gaze flicked toward the tiny gap at the door. Beyond it, a strip of darkness and the echo of the city far below. She hated enclosed spaces, hated being out of control more. "Do what you have to," she murmured, her voice quieter now. Samuel didn't waste another second. He pried off the control panel with a sharp, metallic pop, his hands broad, calloused, steady-moved, with the kind of confidence that came from a life spent fixing things no one else bothered to understand. Ariel watched unwillingly, curious. His uniform shirt was worn soft at the collar. The navy fabric faded from years of washing, a name patch. Samuel was stitched in white thread, a little crooked as if sewn by someone's hand rather than a factory line. "You've done this before," she said, not quite a question. "Yeah." His eyes stayed on the wiring, his tone matter-of-fact. "Used to make a living out of it. Then life decided I should be cleaning floors instead." The elevator jolted violently, throwing Ariel against the wall. Samuel's arm shot out on instinct, catching her shoulder before she could stumble. For a moment, they were close enough for her to notice the faint scent of machine oil and cold winter air clinging to him. "You all right?" he asked. She straightened quickly, brushing off his hand. Perfectly fine, but her fingers curled into her palms, betraying the tremor she wouldn't let him see. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You've got a strange definition of fine." The emergency light blinked again, weaker this time. Samuel reached into his toolbox and pulled out a flashlight. At the beam cutting through the dimness, he leaned into the open panel, muttering under his breath as his fingers worked over tangled wires. Ariel stood rigid, the hum of the cables, and the creak of metal above them gnawing at her composure. "How long?" she asked finally. "If you keep talking." He glanced over his shoulder, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "An hour, if you let me focus. Maybe 5 minutes." The retort was automatic, but it landed differently than she expected. For the first time in months, she felt the faintest pull at the corner of her own mouth, though she quickly smoothed it away. The sound of the metal snapping back into place broke the charged silence. Samuel flipped a switch and the elevator lurched not up, not down, but just enough for the door to unlock with a reluctant sigh. He pried it open a few inches and peered out. "We're halfway between floors. I can get the door open wide enough for you to climb through. You'll need to step over the gap carefully." Ariel's brows lifted. "You expect me to crawl out like someone who wants to get out of a stuck elevator?" He interrupted, his tone dry. "Or you can stay in here and hope the power holds your call." She hesitated only a beat before stepping forward. Samuel braced himself, one boot wedged against the wall for leverage, one hand gripping hers firmly as she swung herself up. The warmth of his grip startled her, steady, unshakable, even as the elevator groaned beneath them. When she was safely on the upper floor landing, she turned back. "Aren't you coming after you? Just making sure this thing doesn't slam shut." He climbed out in one smooth motion, landing beside her. For a moment, they just stood there in the quiet hallway, the world beyond the elevator. Strangely still, Ariel's eyes lingered on him, on the grease smudge along his jaw, the way his breath came in slow, measured pulls. "Thank you," she said at last, though the word sounded reluctant, as if it had to fight its way past pride. Samuel gave a faint nod, already collecting his tools. "You're welcome." She turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, but halfway down the hall, she glanced back. His head was bent over his toolbox, his shoulders broad beneath the worn fabric of his uniform. Something in her chest tightened, an odd, fleeting thought that she quickly dismissed. Ariel walked away without another word. But Samuel, catching the faintest sound of her heels, pausing and then resuming, let himself wonder just for a moment if maybe the elevator wasn't the only thing in this building stuck between floors. "Next time you decide to play hero, Mr. Cross, try remembering your job title." Mr. Bain said it with a smile that never reached his eyes. The building manager's tie was a shade too bright for a Chicago morning, a stripe of confidence wrapped around. A man who liked to sign things he didn't have to lift. He stood in front of the operations clipboard like it was a judge's bench. Samuel didn't flinch. There wasn't time to wait for the contracted elevator tech. The brake relay was popping. We were 30 seconds from a stall. "You bypassed protocol." Baines tapped the clipboard with a capped pen. "You're a janitor. You mop. You don't override safeties and elevators with the CEO inside." From the glass wall at the far end of the service office, a thin plane of winter light spilled across a scuffed floor. Beyond it, Ariel Hartley passed by with 2 board members, all heels and quiet urgency. She glanced in just 1 second, just one red, but whatever flickered in her expression folded back into neutral. She kept walking, noted. Samuel said, "Voice even." He didn't add that neutral was safer for both of them. The building had its own weather system, and rumor was the wind. "Is that all Baines offered?" A soft sigh, disappointed that the reprimand hadn't pierced. "You'll take the graveyard trash run on floors 20 through 26 for the next 3 nights. Consider it a reminder. Understood?" As Samuel turned, Baines said almost kindly, "You save yourself by staying small. Cross." Samuel paused. "No," he said, his hand tightening once on the strap of his toolbox. "You save people by staying steady." He left before the manager could reply. By late afternoon, the city had tipped into blue. Salt dusted the sidewalks like old chalk. Samuel climbed 2 flights to a narrow apartment that smelled faintly of coffee and laundry soap. The lock stuck at the first turn, then gave, like everything else in his life, resistance. Then, mercy. "Dad," Diana called before he could shrug, off his coat. Her voice carried the light of a window he hadn't opened yet. She ran from the small bedroom, one sock on hair, a bright tangle of gold. "Did you know elevators can sing?" "Listen." She held up a sketchbook, but not for the drawing. She held it to her ear like a seashell. "Hear that?" she whispered. He grinned, despite himself. "What am I listening for, champ?" "The silence after it stops," she said solemnly, then flipped the book around. A pencil rendering of an elevator cabin, its light glowing like a lantern in a storm. 2 figures inside, a tall man with a toolbox, a woman with a straight spine, and eyes he recognized even in graphite. Diana had shaded tiny sparks around the man's hands, like the moment between problem and solution. "Is that me?" Samuel asked, softer now. Obviously, she tilted her head. "And that's the lady whose eyes look like ice until they melt." "Did you save her?" "I got the door open." He kept the rest of fear focus, the unasked thanks packed away in the place his pride slept. "Good drawing. You caught the reflection on the panel." She brightened at the craft note, the one currency that felt safe. "I tried cross-hatching for the shadows. Mr. Pratt at school says light needs dark to make sense." "Mr. Pratt is a wise man," Samuel put his toolbox down and glanced toward the kitchen counter, where the mail waited in a spalley of white, his name typed neatly where a life used to be handwritten. Among the envelopes, the one from the court sat like a gray stone. Did Mom call Diana dusted eraser crumbs onto the rug and then guilty pinch them up with a little laugh? Oops. He shook his head. No call. But we've got grilled cheese power tonight and tomato soup that tastes better if you stir it with a spoon shaped like Michigan. You always say that. It's a scientific fact. He set the pan heating, wiped the counter, washed his hands. Every movement a small prayer that didn't need words. When Diana ducked back into her room for colored pencils, he slid the envelope open at the seam with the doctor's com he borrowed for paperwork. He read it quickly like pulling a bandage. Temporary order continued. Supervised visitation remains, in effect. Review set for March 8th. There was a line about stability of employment, about environment and routine. None of it cruel, all of it cold. Dad Diana's voice from the doorway. You spaced? He folded the paper and slid it beneath a community flyer for a coat drive, just thinking about soup. She squinted at him as if she could decode adult thoughts by sheer will. You're a terrible liar. Yes, he said, turning the bread in the butter, letting the sizzle speak for him. I am. They ate at the small table by the window. Snow feathered past the street lamp outside. The radiator ticked like a forgiving metronome. Can I send a letter? To the judge? Diana asked, suddenly keeping her eyes on the corner of her sandwich. Not a mean one, just words that explain the parts adults don't see. Samuel's throat tightened. The judge has rules about who can write letters in cases like ours, but rules can listen right, she said. If someone tells them something true, he stared at his daughter, this 10-year-old girl with a heart that kept choosing hope over safety, and reminded himself to breathe. Tell you what, he said carefully. You can write anything you want. We'll put it in an envelope. If and only if Miss Vargas says it's okay at the next meeting, we'll mail it. Deal. Diana nodded, then leaned across the table. You know what I like the most about you? What's that? You fix things without making the broken parts feel ashamed. He swallowed. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then keep it, she said, tapping 2 fingers to his chest right where old Hurt slept. After dishes, she returned to her sketchbook, adding a small detail he almost missed. A girl's, hand pressed to the elevator glass, tiny and brave. He tucked the envelope deeper into the drawer. He did not tell her the court still asked for proof of predictable income and demonstrated support system. He did not tell her he had applied for a night shift at the warehouse to stabilize hours. He did not tell her he had kept his distance from her mother because the order said so, and because sometimes loving someone meant not giving them another reason to run. Instead, at bedtime, he traced constellations on the ceiling with the weak glow of a flashlight. There, he said, drawing a rectangle of 4 points. The elevator. Diana giggled. Dad, that's just a box. Everything important is a box at first, he said. Then you decide what you carry out of it. Across town, the therapist's office used warm light, and furniture that looked like it had survived other people's grief with dignity. Ariel sat on a low couch coat folded precisely beside her gloves, aligned like quiet soldiers. Dr. Keller waited with a posture that said nothing would startle her. How are you sleeping? The therapist asked. Like a cat at a window, Ariel replied. Alert, tense, pretending to rest. Keller's mouth quirked. You had a day. A stuck elevator, Ariel said, aiming for dismissal and hitting the edge of confession instead. A man with steady hands and the audacity to improvise. The janitor, Keller said not unkindly. The janitor. Ariel adjusted a cuff as if refinement could sand down the truth. He knew exactly how long we had before it went dark, and that mattered. It mattered that someone knew, Ariel said. Her gaze slipped to the framed photograph on the bookshelf, a shoreline at dawn, pale light lifting. I spend my days being the person who knows. It's a relief to be carried for a minute. Keller let the words sit. You told me last year that after your loss, you built a life where nothing could surprise you. It's efficient, she said, then quieter. It's lonely. They worked there a while inside the honest part. How 5 winters ago had split time into before and after. How she had learned to keep the world at a manageable distance. Meetings, measured parties, brief affection, portioned like medicine. Say the child's name, Keller prompted gently. Ariel closed her eyes. The syllables came like a door opening into air that still held her. Mara. Keller nodded. Where is Mara? In the tower you run. Ariel looked up. In the space I never visit, the 17th floor they closed after the accident years ago. She smiled without warmth. We call it a deferred renovation. And if you stood on that floor and listened, Keller asked, I would hear the building breathe. Ariel's hands stopped arranging themselves and settled in her lap, a surrender. I would hear a man's voice saying, I can get you out. And I would hate him for offering. And I would take his hand. Keller said, that sounds like wanting. Ariel's laugh was a small, fragile thing. Wanting is an elevator. It moves you without asking if you're ready. They were quiet a moment. Snow tapped the window with polite fingers. Keller spoke carefully. What is one choice this week that bends you a degree toward life? Ariel considered. I could call the operations office and verify the incident report. Make sure he doesn't get penalized for acting when protocol froze. She paused, then shook her head. No, that invites speculation about favoritism. It hurts more than it helps. Is there another choice? Keller asked. Ariel's gaze drifted to her gloves, black leather, immaculate. I can go to floor 17, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in it. I can stand in the dust and listen. I can stop pretending the past is behind a locked door. Keller smiled. That's not small. No, Ariel said, rising. But small hasn't moved me anywhere worth going. At the threshold, she stopped. He said a line in the elevator. It annoyed me. It also won't leave. She met Keller's eyes. He said, You save people by staying steady. Keller's nod was slow, respectful. And what do you say? Ariel slipped on her gloves. I say steady is the courage to be seen when you can't. Control the ending. She stepped into the hallway. The world smelled like winter and clean floors. Somewhere a child's laughter echoed from another office, a bright, uninvited bell. She did not turn toward it. She moved forward, heels soft on carpet, as if sound itself were an agreement she was learning to honor. Outside, the city's breath rose in faint clouds. She lifted her face to the snow and let it land. Back in the apartment, Diana had fallen asleep mid-sketch, a pencil resting against the page. Samuel eased it from her fingers and stared at what she'd drawn along the right margin. Tiny vertical lines, a child's tally marks. Scratches on the wall counting something only she knew. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. We're getting there, he whispered, one mark at a time. The radiator ticked. The envelope in the drawer waited without malice. In the street below, a plow moved through the night like a quiet promise. The work order was thin as breath and twice as cold. Rain-specced and recommissioned level 17 service lines. Fire sensors. Elevator interface lighting array. Someone had scrolled a warning beneath it in red restricted access. No signature. No comfort. Samuel swiped his badge at the steel door that had not opened for years. The reader hesitated, then chirped. The lock released with the weary sound of a throat clearing before it speaks of the past. Dust sighed out around the frame. He stepped into a hallway, frozen mid-thought. Drop cloths draped over forgotten furniture. A fern fossilized into itself. In a cracked pot, a poster for a charity gala 2 winters old. Still gazing at the elevator lobby with a smile that didn't know it had been canceled. The fluorescents fluttered alive one after another like a reluctant confession. He tested the air with a quick inhale. Paint, paper, metal, that faint ghostly sweetness that old carpet releases when no one has walked its pattern in a while. He set his toolbox down and knelt by the junction panel, unscrewing a faceplate with the care of a man waking a sleeping dog. "Hello?" A voice floated from the open stairwell. Mr. Lawrence appeared, cap in his hands, gray hair combed back with the decorum of another era. He looked smaller on this floor, as if the years pressed a little harder here. "You got the order?" Samuel asked. "I did. It found me on my cart like a note tucked into a hymn book." Mr. Lawrence stepped in, eyes traveling the corridor the way a docent might read a painting. Slow, respectful. "I haven't been up here since." He didn't finish the sentence, only patted the wall near the elevator lobby gently. "You hear buildings breathe, Mr. Cross?" Samuel tightened a wire nut all the time. "On 17, it's a prayer," the doorman said. "Not a loud one. The kind a mother says when she doesn't want to scare the child she's saving." They stood in that for a second. "Why'd they close it?" Samuel asked, though he knew large companies didn't close floors for decoration. He wanted to see if the answer carried more than fact. "An incident," Mr. Lawrence said, eyes on the elevator doors. "No one talks about it because quiet feels like respect, but silence is just a blanket. It doesn't cure the cold." He nodded toward the panel. "You go carefully now. Everything up here remembers. I always do." Samuel checked the emergency feed. Voltage low. Battery done. He made a note to replace it, then pried open the elevator interface housing. A relay clicked, and somewhere in the shaft a cable murmured. "Did you ever want a different life?" Mr. Lawrence asked, not unkindly. Samuel's laugh came out soft. "Sure. Then I learned to want this one better. That's a sentence a man can live inside." Mr. Lawrence eased back toward the stairwell. "I'll be downstairs if the ghosts ask for a pen." Samuel worked. Hours thinned. He replaced brittle wires, coaxed a reluctant fire sensor into reporting, cleared a clogged condensation drain with a pipe cleaner and a patience that would have embarrassed a saint. He labeled things that no one had labeled, "Do not bypass," on a tiny reset button. "Check here first," near a temperamental sensor, because the future is kinder when someone leaves you a map. By late afternoon, the light steadied. He stood at the elevator, lobby, palms braced against the cool seam where doors met. "All right," he said to the machine quietly. "Tell me what you need." Sometimes they did. In the faint slip of air in the way a brake called for mercy. He pressed the call button. The indicator lit. The car was on 19. It hummed to life and began to descend. When the doors parted, Ariel Hartley stood inside a ledger of winter light etched along her cheekbone. For a heartbeat. Neither moved. The last time they had faced those doors, the world had been smaller. She blinked, surprised, but composed. Then, "Where did you learn to fix elevators?" The question was clean, unadorned. It landed with more weight than a greeting. "In a plant on the South Branch," he said, stepping in to hold the door with his shoulder. Steel and motors and men who knew the names of things. Later, in union halls. Later still. Anywhere someone would let me get my hands on a problem. He glanced toward the panel. "You?" She knew what he meant, and for a moment looked like a woman at a window choosing whether to open it. "Interior architecture," she said at last. "Right siren. Neutra. In my head. Materials that forgive touch. Light that keeps its promises. Then my father died, and the board needed a Hartley who could read a balance sheet." She stepped out into the hall, arms uncrossing, as if the air here asked for them. "I chose the balance sheet." The light did not forgive me. Samuel smiled a little. Light can be stubborn. So can people. She paced a few slow steps, reading the corridor without touching it. "This floor never learned how to heal," she said. They closed it and called it prudent. But prudent isn't always kind. Kind still needs a breaker panel, he said. Prudent helps keep people breathing while kind catches up. Her eyes flicked to him. You talk like a man who doesn't waste words. I used to, he said. Then I had a daughter who paints and a judge who counts. Now I try to say things so the right ears can measure them. She took that in, then nodded toward the open interface box. You could have passed this off to the contractor. Could have, he agreed. But the building gave me a job. It's rude to ignore what's in your hands. Do you always answer like a parable? He shrugged. Only when the truth has too many teeth. They stopped at the elevator threshold again. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was shaped like a bowl waiting to be filled. Ariel lowered her voice. I went to the therapist. She said the sentence, both steel and confession. We talked about floor 17 and I'm here. That's more than most people do with advice. She looked at him as if to say, don't make this easy. Then, if you were redesigning this lobby, where would you start with what people feel before they see? He glanced around. Trim the fluorescents. Warm the temperature 3 degrees. Get rid of the echo. Add wood somewhere human hands can rest. A bench that doesn't punish the old. Post a real evacuation map. And he nodded toward the doors. Give the elevator a sound that isn't fear. A chime that tells the body it won't be trapped. She tilted her head. A chime that tells the body it won't be trapped. She repeated softly, as if testing the line for splinters. I miss thinking like that. You still do, he said. I schedule feelings between 4:30 and 4:50, Mr. Cross. It's not the same. He almost laughed. Maybe schedule one reckless minute and see what it buys. Her phone vibrated a small, insistent tremor against her palm. She looked at the screen and the air cooled a degree. Board chair, she said, apology in the 2 words. I have to, of course, she answered, voice seamless, heartly. A pause. I'm on 17. Silence at the other end. She listened longer. Her jaw tightened. I hear you. No, I won't attend tonight's donor preview. Yes, I understand optics. I also understand maintenance schedules. She lifted her gaze to Samuel's for a fraction of a heartbeat. Yes, goodbye. When she ended the call, she stood very still like someone who had just walked through a doorway and found the room rearranged. They think my time on closed floors is a liability. Closed floors are where you learn what the building hides, Samuel said. That knowledge never hurts the right people. She glanced at the paper tag he'd taped to the panel. Check here first. You label things, she observed. That feels generous. Labels save time, he said, and sometimes grief. The elevator chimed. It was the standard note. Clinical indifferent. Ariel winced. You hear how it jitters on the tail? Samuel asked, cocking his head. That's a tired relay. She listened. It sounds like someone swallowing a word they need to say. Then we should let it speak. Her mouth curved despite herself. Mr. Cross Samuel. Samuel, she amended, tasting it. If I asked you to submit an assessment for 17 design and mechanical, I'd say, give me 48 hours and the freedom to tell the truth. Truth is expensive. So are mistakes you make to avoid it. For a moment, the hall seemed brighter, though the bulbs hadn't changed. She took a breath as if she hadn't remembered to in a while. 48 hours, she said. Send it to my office, not to operations. To me. He nodded, the agreement landing like a peg in sure wood. You'll get it. She stepped back into the elevator. He didn't follow. The doors hesitated, sensing perhaps that language still hung between them, then began to slide. Samuel, she said suddenly, catching them with her palm. One more question. He waited. When you're trapped, Ariel asked, voice steady and naked at once. What do you tell yourself so you don't become the room you're stuck in? He met her eyes. I say this. I came in breathing, and I will leave breathing, and until the door opens, I will be useful. The doors closed. The car descended. Samuel stood alone in the lobby of a floor that had decided to remember. He tightened the last screw on the interface, then wrote 2 words on the back of the work order before filing it in his bag. 2. Words that had carried him longer than luck. Be steady. Down the hall, a single fluorescent gave up and blinked out. He smiled as if the building had made a joke only they understood, and flicked open his flashlight to guide himself back to the stairwell. As he reached for the handle, his phone hummed a text from an unknown number. Send the assessment to me. Ah. He saved the contact without ceremony, closed the steel door gently behind him, and let the echo of his footsteps answer the old carpet's quiet question. Will anyone come back? Yes, with tools, with names for things, with a chime that does not promise fear. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Samuel found it on the small workbench in the janitor's break room, sandwiched between a coil of extension cord and a half-empty box of nails. His name wasn't typed. It was written in the looping hand of someone who didn't care for block letters. Inside, a cream card glowed under the flicker of fluorescent light. The Hartley Tower, annual winter gala, date, time, venue, and at the bottom, the words admit to. He looked up to see Mr. Lawrence leaning in the doorway, cap in his hands. Must have been a mix-up, Samuel said. The old doorman's smile was thin, but his eyes were bright with mischief. Mix-ups don't usually have your name spelled right. I might have slid it into the stack before they sealed the envelopes. Samuel frowned. You know I can't show up at that kind of thing. You fixed her elevator, Mr. Lawrence said simply. Sometimes a man should be seen outside of where people expect to find him. Samuel shook his head, but he slipped the invitation into his jacket pocket like a man hiding a dangerous tool. That night, Diana was cross-legged on the floor, coloring, in the details of a snow-covered street. He set the invitation on the coffee table. What's that? She asked, leaning forward. Some fancy party for the building's winter gala? Probably a tux and tie situation, not for us. She studied the card, lips pursed. It says, Admit to. I noticed. Her eyes sparkled. We could go. I could wear the blue dress Aunt Lia got me. For Christmas, the one with the sparkly belt. He chuckled. Kid, you don't want to spend an evening listening to people talk about market forecasts over shrimp cocktails. Maybe not, she said, tilting her head. But I'd like to see you in a suit. Just once, you know, to prove to myself you own more than one kind of shirt. Samuel smiled despite himself. You're a menace. You're scared, she countered softly. Scared they'll see you and not know what to do with you. Her words landed harder than they should have. He sighed. It's not my world, Di. Maybe it's not, she said, returning to her drawing. But you still belong in it, even if it's just for one night. The night of the gala, Chicago's streets glittered with snow that caught the light from street lamps. Samuel stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the collar of his one good suit, a dark navy that had hung in the back of his closet for years. His boots were replaced by black dress shoes that felt like borrowed skin. Diana emerged from her room in the blue dress hair and soft waves, cheeks flushed from excitement. She held out a silver scarf. For you, she said. To match me, he laughed. I'm not wearing a scarf. It's a pocket square, she corrected, tucking it into his jacket before he could protest. Hartley Tower's ballroom was a cathedral of glass and chandeliers. Waiters in white gloves moved between clusters of guests, trays of champagne flutes catching the light like captured stars. Heads turned when Samuel and Diana entered, not in disdain, not exactly, but in the way people notice something that doesn't fit the frame they've been staring at too long. Ariel Hartley stood near the center of the room, speaking with a pair of donors. The emerald silk of her gown caught every light in the room, but her gaze sharpened the instant she spotted him. Surprise flickered across her face, Not the unpleasant kind, but the kind that reorders the map you thought you knew. She excused herself from the donors and approached her steps unhurried but deliberate. "Mr. Cross," she said, and then glancing at Diana. "And this must be your daughter." Diana smiled shilly. "I'm Diana. You're the elevator lady." Samuel stifled a cough. Ariel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I suppose I am. And you must be the artist your father mentioned." Diana's brow furrowed. "He talks about me only in ways that make people think better of the world," Ariel said. Something unguarded flashed in Diana's eyes before she reached into her small purse. "I made this." She handed Ariel a folded piece of thick paper. Ariel opened it to reveal a sketch her own likeness captured mid-laugh, though Samuel couldn't. Remember the last time he'd seen her do it? The lines were sure the shading delicate. "This is remarkable," Ariel said quietly. "You drew this from memory." "I just drew what I thought you'd look like if you weren't so serious all the time," Diana said. Samuel's breath caught, but Ariel didn't flinch. Her gaze lingered on the drawing a second longer before she folded it carefully and slipped it into her clutch. "I'll keep this," she said. "Thank you, Diana." Later, as a string quartet played something warm and slow, Ariel found Samuel near the balcony, watching snow fall over the city. "You clean up?" "Well," she said, stepping beside him. He glanced at her, a half-smile forming. "So do you. But I think you already knew that." Her lips curved, but her tone stayed measured. "Your daughter is extraordinary. You should be proud." "I am," he said simply. She hesitated, then looked out over the city lights. "When I was a child, my father used to bring me to this tower after hours. We'd ride the elevator to the top just to look out. He said, 'The city looks different when you're above it. It makes problems feel smaller.'" Samuel leaned on the railing. "Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just shows you how far you can fall." She studied him. "You always see both sides." "Only if I want the truth," he said. "Truth's never just one thing." Her gaze softened, and for a moment the noise of the gala faded. "Thank you for coming tonight," he shrugged. "Wasn't sure it was a good idea." "Neither was I," she admitted. "But sometimes the wrong rooms need the right people in them." When the evening wound down, Samuel and Diana made their way to the coat check. As he helped her into her jacket, she whispered, "She smiled more tonight. I think the serious part is shrinking." He ruffled her hair. "Maybe. Or maybe you just gave her something she didn't know she needed." Diana grinned. "That's what artists do." As they stepped out into the snowy night, Samuel glanced back through the tall glass doors. Ariel was still there, speaking to another guest, but her eyes found his for the briefest second. It wasn't a smile, not exactly, but it was something that felt a lot like the start of one. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, Samuel walked away, feeling a little taller than when he'd arrived. Snow kept falling as if the city needed erasing before it could be ridden again. On Thursday evening, Samuel finished his shift, late shoulders powdered with flurries when he reached the Hartley Tower lobby. He was turning toward the service exit when he heard her voice. "Mr. Cross, do you drink coffee at indecent hours?" He turned. Ariel stood near the revolving doors in a dark wool coat, hair gathered at the nape. The question was light, the eyes were not. "I've been known to," he said. "Indecent. How hot?" "Strong with truth in it." She gestured toward the side corridor. "There's a corner place that still believes in ceramic cups. Walk with me outside, air-bit like clean glass." The cafe was a narrow room with fogged windows and a radio that thought it was still the 1980s. They slid into a booth. Steam rose from their mugs like a better answer trying to happen. Ariel wrapped her hands around her cup as if warmth could convince her body that speaking wouldn't bruise. "I owe you something," she said. "You don't." "Then call it an exchange." She said, "You gave me floor 17 in sentences I could breathe. I owe you a version of myself that isn't a quarterly report." "What happened to you?" he asked gently. That the world decided stillness was strength. 5 winters ago, she said. A blizzard closed half the city. I was 34 weeks along, she stopped. The word hung there, an empty cradle. We left too late. The hospital became an hour away. We lost her. He didn't move. I turned my life into a spreadsheet. She continued, voice steady and fierce. If I controlled inputs, maybe I could outnumber sorrow. I made rules for breathing. I took promotions like medication. Nothing touched me because nothing was allowed to reach. And the elevator. The elevator was the one thing I couldn't bully into behaving. It reminded me fear isn't a flaw. It's a fire drill. Samuel nodded. So, you came back to the room and looked for the spark. I came back because I didn't want the floor that held my daughter's shadow to become a rumor in my own building. She stared at her hands. I have never said those words aloud. Thank you, he said. She blinked. For what? For trusting me with the part that hurts. Your turn, she said softer. What did the court tell you in language that sounded polite and felt like cold metal temporary order? Supervised visits review pending. They want stability proof my life won't. Tilt if a paycheck trembles. They're not wrong. Stability keeps kids from thinking the world is a trick. And your job? 2 jobs, he said. The tower and a warehouse night shift. I hate less than empty cupboards. I shave sleep instead of corners. It's not heroic. It's arithmetic. That sounds like love, she said. That sounds like rent, he replied with a small, tired smile. Diana pretends not to count the days. She scratches marks on her sketchbook margin. 10 marks mean I owe her pancakes. Ariel's lips curved. A ledger that knows what matters. The waitress sat down a plate of late-night pie. On the house, she said, "You look like you're telling each other the true things." Ariel laughed, an unpracticed sound that startled even her. When the waitress left, she touched a napkin to the corner of her eye as if laughter might smudge. "I was wrong about you," she said. "How so?" "I thought you fixed machines because people disappointed you. And you fix machines because you believe people deserve a world that doesn't fail them at random." He looked out the window where snow rehearsed its small astonishments. "My daughter deserves a door that opens when she presses the button. So does every stranger who steps into a box, trusting it will rise. And you?" she asked. "What do you deserve?" "The chance to be believed when I say I'm trying." She sat with that, then leaned forward, words cautious and clean. "Let me help." "With what?" His voice didn't scoff. It only protected a wound from too much light. "The review hearing," she said. "I know people who can make sure your employment looks the way the court needs it to look. Our counsel can advise on documenting routine showing the judge the home you already keep." "I'm not a charity, Miss Hartley. I'm not offering charity," she said, steel warmed by grace. "I'm offering a correction. Systems fail in predictable directions. Sometimes the right thing is to adjust the angle. It could look like I'm using you," he said. "It could look like I'm doing my job," she replied, and like a woman who remembers what it felt like when the door did not open in time and doesn't want another child to learn that lesson by heart. He exhaled. "What would you need from me?" "Honesty on paper. No polishing. Your schedule, your costs, your plan if the warehouse shift gets cut, names of anyone who can testify. You are already the father you're trying to be." And she paused as, if stepping from a curb she wasn't sure was their permission to care. "Care has strings. Everything worth lifting does," she said. "I won't pull. I'll hold." He swallowed. "Okay." They ate pie like a peace treaty. When they finished, Ariel glanced at her phone and winced. "It's late. Your daughter's staying with a neighbor," he said. "Shelf-stable emergencies and responsible adults." We do okay. They stood. The bell on the cafe door gave a tired cheer when they pushed through. Snow slanted under the streetlights. Halfway back to the tower, the wind picked up. Ariel stopped, breath clouding. You ask me what happened. May I ask you something? Anything? Why didn't you leave? She asked. When the court ordered a distance, when the job shrank your name, why didn't you cut the rope and drift? Because love isn't a promise to feel good, he said. It's a decision to stay useful. Some days that means fixing a relay. Some days it means washing the only clean shirt at midnight so your kid doesn't wear yesterday's worry to school. Useful, she echoed. It's not glamorous, but it stacks up. They reached the revolving doors. Samuel, she said, catching the door with her palm. One last thing. He waited. I haven't cried, she said in 5 winters. I couldn't afford the flood. Her eyes shimmered, then steadied. Tonight I did, in a cafe with radio heaven over pie. I thought you should know where the crack started. He didn't touch her. He offered the one thing that could be accepted without debt. Thank you, he said, for letting the water find air. She nodded, chin trembling once before she reclaimed it. Send me what you can by Monday, she managed. I'll do the rest quietly. I don't need the world to know, he said. I just need the judge to. They parted at the security desk, a boundary respected because it made the next crossing mean more. Outside, the snow went on, believing in morning. Monday arrived like a test that didn't care if anyone had studied. Samuel stood at the tiny kitchen table spreading documents the way a careful man spreads cards, pay stubs, shift schedules. Statement from his foreman, a note from Miss Vargas about supervised visits that read kier than the law required. He checked every page twice, then slid them into a plain manila folder addressed in block letters to a Hartley. Diana hovered near the window, the winter light laying a soft coin on her hair. Can I add something? She asked. To the folder, he looked up, not to the folder. She worried her lower lip. To the week, he softened. What's your something? A letter, she said. For the judge. I wrote it last night. I know you said we should ask Miss Vargas first. I won't mail it. I just want it to exist. She fished a folded page from her sketchbook. Her name was printed at the top in neat, determined pencil, Diana Cross. Can I see? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He read, Dear Judge, my dad doesn't wear a suit, but he wears brave. He fixes things when they're scared. He makes soup when the world is cold. He taught me that if you get stuck, you can count to 10. Breathe twice, and try again. He is not perfect at laundry, but he is perfect at staying. Please let me see him without a grown-up who writes everything down. Love, Diana. Samuel exhaled a sound like a small door opening. It's beautiful, he said, and it's exactly why we must wait for Miss Vargas. Words like that deserve the right envelope. Diana nodded, then as if the weight of it were too great to hold, tucked the letter back into her sketchbook. I'll keep it safe, she said. He gathered his folder, kissed the top of her head pancakes after school deal, and stepped out into the morning, where the air felt like a clear instruction. Ariel was in her office when he arrived, the skyline framed cleanly behind her, like a promise she had decided to keep. She wore a charcoal dress and an expression that said she'd already translated 3 crises into spreadsheets before 9. Right on time, she said, closing her laptop. May I? He handed her the folder. It's all there. What the court asked for and what I can give. She lifted the flap, scanning schedule. Pay stubs, foreman's testimony, Vargas's note. A modest budget that made a machine of survival look almost elegant. She stopped on a single page, not clipped with the rest, folded in a way that suggested small hands of pencil smudge ghosting the corner. What's this? She asked more to herself than to him and unfolded it before he could answer. The letter was not for her, and yet it reached her with the force of an address. She read it once quickly, as if speed could protect her. She read it again slowly, as if reverence might. When she looked up, she did not hide that her eyes had changed. "Did you mean to include?" This Samuel took a step, startled. "No, that's Diana's. It wasn't supposed to." He stopped, jaw tight, with the reflex to apologize for wanting something impossible. "I'll take it back." She held the paper carefully like a fragile instrument that still knew how to play. "No, let me keep it for an hour." Her voice softened. "It's good to be trusted with a letter that was brave enough to be written." Samuel searched her face. "It wasn't meant for leverage." "It's not leverage," she said. "It's testimony." A beat passed. He cleared his throat. "If it complicates things." "Truth complicates things," she said. "It also arranges them." She slipped the letter back into the folder, placed the folder on her desk, and set her palm on it, grounding both of them. "I'll speak to our counsel, not to carry. You don't bristle, but to show the court what already stands." He couldn't help it. A laugh escaped low and frayed. "I'm bristling at being seen. That's all." She smiled, the kind that made contradictions sit down together for a meal. "Get used to it." A chime from her computer interrupted them. She checked the screen, then looked up with that crisp efficiency she wore like a cape. "I have to walk into a board prep in 3 minutes. Can I text you later? You have my number." "I do." She gathered the folder. Samuel. He paused at the threshold. "You didn't ask me to make this my business," she said. "I am making it my business anyway." He nodded once, as if accepting a medal no one would see. By noon, Ariel had interrupted her. Own rules. She walked to legal with the folder in her hands and the ice in her ribs slightly thawed. "Stan," she said to the general counsel, a practical man with the gift of knowing which hill to fight on. "I need a fast, quiet pathway to request. A review hearing on a custody visitation order. Pruno support. But no signatures from me that would look like personal involvement with an employee. I need it now." Stan rose, eyebrows somewhere north of procedure. "Who not your concern," she said. But she slid the budget across the desk. "A single parent works here and at night meets every standard the court claims to want." Stan skimmed. "He's done the work." "Yes. What do you need from me?" "A draft motion for review, a list of documentation the judge will respect more than adjectives, and a way to file without the appearance of favoritism." She watched him think. Also, this letter. Stan read Diana's page and surrendered the fight faster than policy expected. "We can't submit a child's letter without the guardian ad litem's approval." "I know," Ariel said. "We won't, but it will inform how we write the motion." He nodded once. "Give me 48 hours. You have 24. He almost smiled. "You used to only bend time for mergers." "This is a merger," she said. "Between a system and the people it's supposed to serve." As she left, she passed a glass wall that reflected her plainly. A woman moving through power like a person who had stopped apologizing for having it. In the elevator, she held the folder close. The car hummed. The familiar corporate chime bit at her ear. "You sound like someone swallowing a word." "They need to say," she whispered to the machine, and the absurdity of talking to an elevator made her laugh silently. "Well, fix that." The doors opened to the lobby. Mr. Lawrence stood at his post, the only man who could make standing still look like a service. His eyes, soft but alert, took in the folder without asking. "Good morning, Ms. Hartley," he said. "Morning, Mr. Lawrence." She caught herself. "What do you hear the building say today?" "That we are overdue for kindness," he replied. "But the delivery truck just pulled up." She let the smile come brief and real. Keep the dock clear. Always. That evening, snow angled across the city like handwriting slanting toward a conclusion. Samuel walked Diana home from school along sidewalks crisp with salt. She told him about a classmate who brought a lizard for show and tell, and how the class voted the lizard's name should be Chai because it looked like cinnamon. Lizards don't drink tea, he observed. Neither do some people who are named after it. She countered wise in the way that made him both proud and suddenly older. At the apartment, she disappeared into her room with her sketchbook while he started dinner mac and cheese with peas that Diana would pick out and call dots of sadness. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, which wasn't unknown anymore, from We have a path council is drafting needy proof of stable childcare. Backup or night shift letter from neighbor would help. Also, a simple weekly routine chart. I'll send a template, he replied quickly. Thank you, I can get a letter from Mrs. Heating downstairs. She knows Di's entire homework schedule by heart. A bubble of typing appeared. Perfect. One more thing. Don't be seen with me in public for a while. Optics are the cheapest weapons people buy. He stared at the line. It stung, then steadied. Understood. Doesn't change the work. No, she wrote. It protects it. Diana emerged holding a page she'd been working on. I drew the judge, she announced. Samuel blinked. You've never met the judge. I made a version who listens. She turned the sketch around. A bench, a robe, a soft mouth. Above the figure in pencil banners, the words, listen first, decide last. He laughed, then swallowed it as if it might be disrespect. It's very judicial. Can we make pancakes early? She asked. I'm hungry now. We'll make a truce and call it Bryn, he said. As the pan heated, he thought of Ariel's text of distance, offered not as a rejection, but as a shield. He felt the familiar pull to step back from anything that looked like dependence. He also felt the truth. Sometimes you were not weak because you accepted help. You were wise because you knew where your strength should be spent. After dinner, while Diana rinsed plates and turned the act into a rhythm game, Samuel opened his email to find the template Ariel had promised, a simple chart with boxes labeled Wake School After Care. Dinner, homework, bedtime. It was unromantic and perfect. He filled it in every line, a small claim, we live here, we keep time, we show up. A second email arrived, a scanned copy of a drafted motion skeleton, the sort of document that speaks in nouns like consideration and demonstration. But tonight sounded very much like hope. He forwarded it to Miss Vargas with a brief note. He added a postscript. P.S. There is a letter my daughter wrote. Not submitted, not yet, but I think it's the truest thing in the room. When it's time, tell us where to put it. He hit send before he could talk himself out of faith. Ariel stood by her apartment window. The city spread like a map of choices. She set Diana's letter on her desk, read it again, and placed a single paperweight on the corner, a glass orb with a tiny, trapped storm. Then she opened a drawer and drew out a small, faded photograph. A sonogram, freeze, grainy and miraculous. She pressed her thumb to the blur that had been Mara, then placed the photo beside the letter. I know, she whispered. I know, her phone chimed again. A calendar reminder from an earlier version of herself. Donor preview optics. She slid it to dismiss. When she turned back to the window, her reflection met her clear, unadorned. A woman who had learned the difference between secrecy and privacy. She reached for her laptop and began to type an email to a judge she would never meet, about a father who did not ask to be carried, and about what a city owes a child brave enough to write letters she doesn't mail. She ended it with a sentence that did not sound like corporate. Steady is the courage to be seen when you can't control the ending. Then she clicked save, not send. Some words needed a witness before they needed a stamp. Outside the elevator, In her building glided past her floor, its chimes small and apologetic. She listened. Soon she said, "We'll let you speak." The scream was small enough to be mistaken for machinery. It thinned through the ventilation like a frightened note. A child soprano snagged on the building's ribs. Samuel was on 17, kneeling beside the interface housing he'd labeled "Check Here" first. When the sound stitched itself to his spine, he stilled, listened again. There, between the hum of the traction motor and the soft whir of fan belts. Another. Cry swallowed quickly like someone trying to be brave because adults had told them that was a job. He hit the radio. "Ops, this is Cross on 17. I'm hearing a distress cry in the shaft. Shut down dispatch on all cars. Repeat, hold all cars in place. Confirm." Static. Then Baines, breathless with irritation and fear. "We've got a stuck car between 16 and 17. Private tenant tour kid slipped when the group panicked. The doors faulted open a few inches. "Fire is en route. You are not too." Samuel was already running. The landing at 17 opened into a bright lobby he'd coaxed back from the past. Now fear rewrote it. A cluster of adults near the shaft, 2 white-knuckled assistants, a guard, a man in an expensive coat whose voice was too loud because he needed a villain fast. The elevator door was gapped 1.5 inches behind that darkness, and a narrow moan that did not belong to metal. "Back up," Samuel said, calm, grafted to command. "Give me a clear lane." "Sir, you can't," the guard began. "Listen to the man who knows the names of things," Mr. Lawrence said, arriving like an old bell. His hand, steady as a rail, urged the guard aside. Ariel pushed through the knot of people hair loose from its safe knot, eyes bright with the terrible clarity of a person who has already lived the worst day and refuses to let it happen again. "We're between floors," Samuel said, palms flattening against the cool seam. He dropped to the inspection panel, keyed it open, and killed the local call. "Ops, lock out power to car 2. Tag it. No one re-energizes without my voice." "Confirm. Confirmed," Baines said, all bluster wrung from him. "Fire is 3 minutes out. 3 minutes is long if you're 10, Samuel said mostly to the door. He pressed his mouth to the gap so his voice would travel. "Hey, it's Samuel. I fix scared machines. What's your name?" A breath hiccuped. "Leo." "Hi, Leo." "You got any superpowers?" A sniffle. "I can count really fast. That's the best one," Samuel said. "Here's our trick. You count. I crawl. We meet somewhere brave." Ariel crouched beside him. "What do you need?" "Wedge strap and light." He didn't look at her. Looking would cost him seconds he didn't own. "And to borrow your voice." "My voice." "Tell the room to be quiet," he said gently. "Fear echoes. We need stillness." She stood and the room obeyed before she spoke. "Everyone back 10 FT, she said. "No commentary, no phones. If you need to pray, do it silently and mean it." Silence took a breath and held it. Samuel forced the doors a fraction wider with a rubber wedge enough to see the shaft rails cables of ribcage of steel. The car sat inches below the sill. Through the filter of the dust-fleck emergency light, he saw small sneakers pressed against the inside of the door. And to the right, a little hand white knuckled around a scrap of molding. "Low!" he called, sliding a strap through the gap and looping it around the car door handle from the inside with a mechanic's blind grace. "I'm going to open this door a little. You'll see my face. You don't let go until I say the line. The line goes like this. We leave breathing. You got it. A shaky exhale. Got it." He braced. "Ariel, on my count, push with me. Gentle. We don't want to bounce." She knelt, palms steady. "I'm here. 1, 2, hold." They leaned into the seam. The door resisted, then ceded a sliver, as if persuaded by the tone more than the torque. The gap widened enough for Samuel to reach. He slid his arm in. Up to the elbow, the metal bit cold into his forearm. He found Leo's jacket, then the small thud of a heart running too fast. Okay, buddy, you're stuck because the car settled, he said, voice even as a pulse. I'm going to lift you an inch and pull you through the safest way. You'll be scraped by my sleeve. That's normal. I'll take it all. I'm scared, Leo whispered. Me too, Samuel said. That means we're awake. Ariel lowered her head to the gap. Leo, she said, her voice softened by something that sounded like memory and mercy. I have a rule. When you're afraid, you count 10 true things. I'll start. 1, my name is Ariel. 2, the floor is solid under my feet. 3, I can see your shoes and they're very brave. 4, Leo managed as I can smell peppermint from your coat. Ariel smiled into the dark. 5, is the man next to me always keeps promises. 6, Samuel said, breath steady. On 3, we move. 1, 2. He pulled a clean, practiced motion that respected the hinges and the boy. Leo slid, snagged, and then came free into Samuel's grip, small body colliding with his chest. A shoe caught the sill. Samuel took the brunt against his shoulder so Leo wouldn't. Pain lanced a hot wire across muscle, but he did not flinch where the boy could feel it. He tucked Leo tight and rolled backward. The room exhaled in a single animal sound. Someone clapped a hand to a mouth. The guard made a noise he didn't know he'd make. Mr. Lawrence crossed himself without apology. Ariel dropped to the floor beside them. Lo, look at me. 2 enormous eyes, wet and indignant at being frightened, met hers. I didn't cry, he announced as if filing a report. I did, she said. You just couldn't see it. Leo's father expensive coat. The loud voice now properly. Small fell to his knees, his thanks a stammer. Samuel handed the boy over gently. You're okay, he told Leo. You were useful. That's what brave does. It stays useful. Fire arrived at speed and protocol. Gear gloves, a lieutenant who looked at Samuel at the gap at the wedge and gave a single professional nod that meant good work. Medics checked Leo. He declared the pulse oximeter a robot finger and forgave it. Baines shouldered in red-faced and thinning cross. What part of fire is en route suggested heroics. Samuel stood slowly rolling his shoulder with the quiet W's of a man who files pain for later. The part where 3 minutes is long for a child, he said. Power was locked out and the door secured. That was the safest move. We'll be reviewing this in the morning. Review bravery, Mr. Lawrence said mildly. See if we can order more? Ariel stepped forward. Mr. Baines, she said. Ice, gentle as a scalpel. If you discipline a man for doing the right thing safely, you'll do it without my consent and publicly. Baines's mouth opened, then recalibrated. Of course, Ms. Hartley. For the record, Cross acted within an emergency exception. Good, she said, and turned to Samuel. You're hurt. I'm fine. That's not a diagnosis, she replied. Medbay now? He should have refused. His shoulder throbbed with the heat that suggested torque and bruise, not tear. He nodded once. On the way to the service elevator, Ariel walked beside him, matching his measured pace. What did you tell yourself? She asked. In there? Yes. The same thing I told Leo, he said. We leave breathing. Her breath caught, and for a beat, the hallway returned to the night she had almost not crossed. Thank you, she said. 2 syllables that held the fragile, infuriating gratitude of a woman who refused to owe but insisted on honoring debt. He looked at her. You're welcome. In the med bay, a nurse with competence for a voice palpated his shoulder, strapped a compression band, and gave him instructions that sounded like a recipe for patience. Ariel waited outside the curtain arms, folded eyes on an invisible line only she could see. When he emerged, she straightened. Press will want this, she said. We can't. Hide it. We shouldn't. A child rescued a building that knows how to say sorry when it scares someone. But we'll tell it right. Right? He asked with the verbs that matter, she said. Locked out, secured, assessed, lifted. We'll honor fire. We'll honor the boy. We'll say your name. You don't have to say my name. I know, she said simply, but I choose to. They stepped into the lobby where already camera phones had rehearsed their angles. Ariel walked to the press cluster with a posture that turned noise into order. The microphones lifted toward her like flowers toward sun. At approximately 4:18 p.m., an elevator car stopped between floor 16 and 17, she said, voice level clean. A child was briefly caught at the door. Our employee, Mr. Samuel Cross, executed. A safe, locked-out rescue in coordination with our security and with first responders en route. The child is stable. We're conducting a full systems review and will report findings. Today ends with gratitude. A reporter called Ms. Hartley. Are you endorsing staff acting outside protocol? I'm endorsing steady hands and clear heads, she said. And a building culture that chooses people over optics in an emergency, Mr. Cross. Another voice pushed through. How did it feel? Samuel met the lenses. He hated the feeling of being translated by glass. He chose a sentence Diana would understand. It felt like doing the next right thing until the door opened. Ariel's mouth tilted as if the line had given her something to carry. They turned away. Behind them, microphones murmured with the small greed of machines that wanted more. Ahead, the security doors offered them a corridor without cameras. At the threshold, Ariel's phone chimed hard. The board's group thread lighting up. Optics liability. Who authorized statement? We need to discuss boundaries with operations staff. Ariel call. She looked at the screen, then at Samuel. The board will have feelings, she said dryly. Boards do, he said. So do elevators. You teach both to speak or they scare people. Will you rest? She asked. I'll work, he said. Then I'll rest. Of course you will, she said, and wrote something on her palm with her nail, an old habit from school days when paper was scarce and memory needed a hook. It wasn't a word, just two letters, one atop the other, S over C. By evening, the story had outrun the building. Local news led with the footage, a grainy shot of a man in a navy shirt pulling a child through a perilous gap, a CEO's voice saying, "Gratitude instead of liability." Comments bloomed the way cities do after rain. Words like hero made Samuel itch. He preferred nouns that didn't look away from the work. But Diana, watching on the couch with his jacket draped over her like a small tent, squeezed his hand so hard he thought bone might admire bone. That's you, she whispered. And that's the sound of right. It's just steady, he said. But let the pride stand with them a minute. Ariel, alone in her apartment, watched the same footage. Her phone pulsed on, the counter aboard chair's number blossoming like a bruise. She let it ring through once, twice, then answered voice even. I'm here, she said, and before you ask yes, I said his name, a pause, a lecture forming. She looked out at the city where elevators rose and fell like patient lungs. You can have my position, she added. Quiet and immovable as weather when you take my reasons. Silence. Then the argument shifted shape. She hung up and stood at the window until her reflection became the night. On the table, the glass paper, we cupped a tiny storm over a child's letter. She tapped it once like a conductor asking the orchestra to look up. Steady, she told the room. Steady, and we rise. The conference table was long enough to stage a trial and polished enough to see herself losing. Ariel took her seat at the head. Spine, straight hands folded as if they too were listening. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, Chicago wore its winter like a well-cut coat. Inside, the board wore concern like a weapon. Let's begin, said Chairwoman Delaney, stacking papers whose conclusions were already decided. Public sentiment is effusive. She tapped a print out of headlines. Janitor saves. Child CEO praises steady hands. It's trending in our favor for now, but there are liabilities. Say liability once more and it may become a person, Ariel replied evenly. Let's discuss specifics. A CFO cleared his throat. Optics. Ariel, you named an hourly employee at a press gaggle. People will start asking why that employee was near a VIP tour, what training he had, and whether you have a relationship that clouds judgment. Ariel let the accusation hang where it belonged, in the board's air, not in her lungs. We have footage protocols and a lieutenant from fire who signed off on Mr. Cross's actions, she said. We also have a child who slept at home last night. Delaney laced her fingers. We're not debating the rescue. We're debating perception. You are visible. Any hint of impropriety invites the kind of attention that redefines us without our consent. What do you require? Ariel asked, the words cut to fit. A message, Delaney said, crisp as snow. A statement to operations reminding staff to defer to protocol and avoid freelancing. Her eyes sharpened, and a personal boundary, no further appearances. With Mr. Cross. No private meetings. If he enters your orbit, it will be as a member of a committee with minutes or not at all. You're asking me to make a good man invisible because he did his job well. We're asking you to preserve the institution you lead, Delaney said. Or choose otherwise. There it was, the lever on the fulcrum. Ariel kept her breath measured. When I took this seat, we wrote a value statement. People over optics when emergencies. Demand it. That line was never meant to cover. Sentiment, the CFO murmured. Neither am I, Ariel said, the faintest smile. Visiting and leaving. I'm covering responsibility. A lawyer to her left slid a memorandum forward. HR prepared a note. With your sign-off, it goes out today. It does not name Cross. It reiterates chain of command in emergencies. Ariel read the first line. We remind all staff that deviation from protocol, even with good intentions, can invite undue risk. She set it down. We will not punish courage in code. She said, revise. We thank all staff who act with calm in emergencies. Where protocol fails to meet the moment, we will circulate best practices so courage is safer next time. Delaney's brows lifted. You will not be moved. I will be led by better language. Ariel said words teach culture. She closed her portfolio. Anything else? One last matter, Delaney said gently. Which is how knives announce themselves. There is concern you may be emotionally entangled with this employee. We cannot forbid that. We can forbid the appearance of favoritism. Choose Ariel. Your distance or your chair? Ariel met the chairwoman's eyes. Distance does not threaten my ethics, she said. My silence would. Silence rippled the table. Someone coughed. Pens straightened. Very well, Delaney said at last, as if consenting to weather. Operate with judgment. Protect the tower. We will revisit. They adjourned. People moved toward doors with the relief of those who have performed duty without inviting conscience to linger. When the room emptied, Stan from Lego lingered. Want the lawyerly consolation? He asked quietly. Is it made of coffee? He nodded, toward the window. You held the line without burning the bridge. That's not common. I'm tired of common, she said, then softened. Thank you for the motion work. We'll have the neighbor letter today. He tapped the folder he carried. You'll have a draft by evening. For what it's worth, I have 2 kids. If a man like Cross wants to be seen by a judge, I want to hand him the light. Me too, she said. Samuel didn't wait for news. He knew what storm sounded like in buildings. That afternoon, he found Ariel in the service corridor off the lobby, the place leaders used when they didn't have time to be seen. Before you say anything, he began, voice steady on purpose. I'm resigning. She stared. No, it protects the work you're trying to do. I'll pick up the warehouse hours, find a new day shift. The board won't have to invent rules around a ghost they don't have to see. Don't make yourself a ghost to make my life easier, she said, heat flashing through the reason. That is not the deal. Deals change, he said. Diana's review is in weeks, and I can't risk mess. If your name next to mine hurts the motion, I'll cut every tie but the one I can hold in court. You think your dignity demands a vanishing act? She said, It doesn't. It demands you stand and take what you've earned. What I've earned is a reputation for being useful, he said. I can be useful somewhere else. She took a breath that felt like choosing a slope to fight on. I will not accept your resignation today. If you're quitting to appease my board, that's theater. If you're quitting to buy your daughter 3 points, with a judge, show me the math. Otherwise, stand your ground. He opened his mouth, closed it. The corridor hummed. An elevator chimed somewhere a tired apology he'd promised to fix. You're asking me to let you take the heat. I'm asking you to believe I know my temperature, she said, and to trust that I don't trade people for comfort. He looked down at his hands, scarred, scraped, unremarkable. What if the noise gets too loud? Then we speak more clearly, she said, and if clarity fails, we speak again. People don't usually stand with me this long, he said. I don't stand with usual, she replied. He nodded once. A man revising an exit plan. One condition, he said. You put everything in writing. If you need to distance, you tell me in sentences I can respect. You have my word, she said. And a memo, he almost smiled. That evening, the apartment smelled of pancakes because Diana had declared a holiday called Later is Now. She flipped one lopsided disc with so much joy it felt professionally plated. Did anything good happen? She asked, maple syrup already plotting adventures across her plate. Yes, he said, and something hard that might become good. You always say that, she chewed thoughtfully. It usually becomes true. When she settled with her sketchbook, he stepped into the hallway with his phone and called the number that had saved itself in both their lives. She picked up on the first ring. I didn't accept. He laughed softly into the receiver. I didn't insist. Progress, she said. A rustle of papers. Stan has the draft. Miss Vargas is aligned. I need the neighbor's letter by tomorrow. You'll have it. Samuel, she added, voice gentler. I'm sorry the board made you measure yourself against fear again. I've been doing that since I was 10, he said. The ruler is familiar. Then throw it away, she said. Measure yourself against love. The line held quiet, long enough to mean yes. The next morning, the tower's lobby felt like a city square. People, softening as they passed Mr. Lawrence's desk, Winter, arguing kindly with the door. Ariel crossed with purpose and an unguarded mouth the fragile brand of courage. Miss Hartley, Mr. Lawrence said, straightening as if greeting a guest of honor at a place that had finally remembered the word honor. A minute? He reached beneath the desk and produced a long cardboard tube, old and dented at one end, a clumsy band of masking tape, heel marking a name, Hartley Tower concept. I found it in storage, he said. Filed wrong, like most good ideas. She eased off the cap and slid out a large brown blueprint. Not quite a blueprint warmer, hand-drawn. 2 names in the title block in pencil that had survived touched Thomas Hartley, and beneath it a Decker. Her father's steady engineer's script paired with a hand more hesitant, likely a worker who'd earned a corner of the page. Mr. Lawrence pointed at a note along the side margin, faint in the pencil her father used when he wrote like a father, not an owner. 17th floor gathering hall. No key cards. Bridge the suits and shoes. People first. Ariel's throat tightened. She remembered standing on a stool at a drafting table, watching her father draw the line that holds the building together, the one no one can see, but everyone lives inside. Who was Decker? She asked. A lift man who knew how to listen. Mr. Lawrence said. Your father trusted the ones with dirty hands and clean eyes. She held the paper like a flag that chose her back. The note about floor 17 glowed in tired graphite. Bridge the suits and shoes. Thank you, she said. 2 words this time, a prayer that had learned to walk. Some floors close because we forget what they were. For Mr. Lawrence replied, perhaps it's time to remember. She rolled the drawing carefully, heart beating at a kinder tempo. The board could storm. Storms clear air. She had a map now, one drawn by a man who believed buildings were verbs. Samuel arrived on the night shift with 2 coffees and a shoulder that admitted it still ached. Ariel waited by the elevator he'd promised to teach to sing. "I have something," she said, handing him the tube. "From my father, a note about floor 17. He wanted a bridge." Samuel read the marginized brightening almost imperceptibly. "That's a sentence a city can live inside." "Yes," she said, "and a board can argue with they will," he said. "Let them. Bridges don't ask permission from the river." She laughed, brief, astonished at the shape of the sentence. "Will you help me redraw it?" "Not as a gesture, as a foundation." "Only if we start with the chime," he said, "so people know they're safe when they arrive." "Done," she said. The elevator hummed, resigned to its current voice. Soon it would sound like a promise made by people who knew how to keep one. For now, they stood in a bright rectangle of lobby-light blueprint, between them the city outside their reflection. He didn't reach for her hand. She didn't offer. They held the future by its margin and read the words written in a pencil, strong enough to outlast grief. People first. The blueprint lay unrolled across Ariel's dining table like a patient finally willing to be examined. The paper had yellowed at the edges. The pencil notes her father's sure hand. The quieter scrawl of a Decker held a kind of warmth no screen could imitate. Outside, Chicago's winter leaned its shoulder against the glass. Inside the apartment smelled faintly of lemon oil and memory. She traced the margin again. 17th floor gathering hall. No key cards. Bridge the suits and shoes. People first. Then, because grief and resolve often share a hinge, she went to the hall closet and pulled down the long, unsorted box that had followed her through 3 moves. Thomas H. Emisk. The misc had outlived him with irritating persistence. She cut the tape. The box was a time capsule of unorganized Love Company pins, a bent protractor, a badge from the tower's opening night that still smelled faintly of cigar and cologne. Beneath them, a leather portfolio. She opened it and found a page that made her sit down with the abruptness of discovery. A memo draft addressed to Board of Directors never sent. Refloor 17 Pilot Community Access Atrium Rationale. A building is not a vault. It is a civic organ. Floor 17 will host free legal clinics on Thursdays, job fairs on Saturdays, and hot coffee every morning without ID checks. You get more loyalty from kindness than from key cards. Beneath, her father had added a small, crooked, smiley face, as if embarrassed by his own earnestness. Ariel laughed, then covered her mouth, then cried the way good news sometimes hurts when it arrives late. When she was finished, she set the page beside the blueprint and took out a fresh legal pad. The title wrote itself, Floor 17, Foundation Draft. She listed what the space could hold: day laborer legal aid, free financial counseling, resume clinics. With real feedback, evening workshops led by custodial staff on maintenance basics for tenants. A warm room on the coldest days with coffee that didn't require a badge. She added a line that wasn't on any budget but belonged to everyone. Dignity is the cheapest security system. Her phone vibrated. Stan from legal. I've got the revised motion in the filing path. He said Vargas is aligned. Also, I saw a ghost today. Which one? Thomas Hartley's note in your handwriting. He said, dryly, You're building the bridge, aren't you? I'm remembering it, she said. I need to charter a foundation that can outlast board weather. Then we make it a separate legal entity with you as a founder and a diverse advisory council. The company can partner but not own. Keeps politics out of Mercy. Name Floor 17. She said mission bridge the suits and shoes. First hire a coordinator who knows how to listen. First invite. He asked a smile in the word. She stared at the blueprint. Samuel, she said, as co-founder. Not a mascot, a decision-maker. Optics will scream. Optics can write their own letter, she replied. Well, right hours. She hung up and after a breath texted Mr. Lawrence. Are you awake? 2 dots then. Buildings don't sleep. Would you come by my apartment? I need a witness before I make a promise. Cap and coat already on Miss Ariel. An hour later, Mr. Lawrence stood at her table, peering down through his readers. Thomas would have loved the word foundation, he said. A word with feet. I need a pledge before I face the board, she said. Not money? Courage? You have more than you think, he said, tapping the margin where a Decker had signed. That? Man showed your father where to put the screws. Maybe we can return the favor. Will you serve on the advisory council? She asked, sudden and sure. If you'll let an old doorman die at a meeting someday, he said, poker-faced, then grinned when she choked on a laugh. Yes, I'll stand next to this with my first and last name. She printed the draft charter and with him as a witness signed her name. Then she slid a second page across the table. Invitation co-founder. Should I deliver it? He asked, already picturing the route. Yes, she said, but not as a favor. As a message from the building to the man who listens. He tucked the envelope into his coat pocket like a relic. At the door, he paused. You know, the board will ask if you're building this to polish a story. I'm building it to tell the truth, she said. Stories polish themselves when the truth stands long enough. Then wear good shoes, he said. Truth has stairs. Samuel found the envelope taped to his apartment door when he and Diana returned. From the grocery store with a lopsided bag of oranges and the cheapest good bread in the city. Diana spotted the Hartley Tower seal and stood on her toes. Is it trouble? She asked. Only one way to find out. He slid a thumb beneath the flap. The letter was brief, the kind of brief that carries weight. Samuel, I found a map my father and a lift man drew together. It was mislabeled miscellaneous, which seems to be where good things go when people stop paying attention. I am founding the Floor 17 Foundation to do what the map intended, bridge the suits and shoes. I am inviting you to co-found it, not as the face we point at in a press release, but as a builder with a pen. If you say yes, our first meeting is tomorrow at 7 a.m. on 17. Bring a list of what a safe room actually needs. Bring the truth. Diana read it twice, reverent as church, then solemnly. You have to say yes. It's illegal to say no to bridges. Samuel stared at the page long enough for the groceries to consider thawing. He thought of the boardroom storm of Ariel standing like weather you could trust, of a blueprint margin written by hands that knew steel and grief. He thought of Diana's letter with its small, invincible voice. He thought of the relief on a child's face when the door finally opened. I'll need better shirts, he said. I can draw you some, Diana replied. Tomorrow, he said to the letter in the city and the old ache that had learned to stand next to hope without arguing. Yes, at dawn. 17 was a soft-lit hush. Samuel arrived with a thermos, a notebook, and a new compression bandage. Ariel was already there. Hair pulled back the blueprint, pinned to a portable board coffee in the paper cups that steamed like early vows. You look awake, he said. I think I am, she said. Will you walk me through what the room needs before I choose paint? That means, well, but lies. He opened his notebook. Start with thresholds. The door must not intimidate. No badge readers. Clear signage with verbs. Ask, sit, learn, eat, warm. A low desk where someone meets your eye sitting, not an edifice designed to shrink you. Coat hooks at 3 levels. Storage for dignity lockers with combinations instead of keys people can lose. Seating, she asked. Pen ready. Mixed chairs with arms for people who need help standing. Stools for quick stops. Couches that aren't traps firm enough to rise from a kid's corner with things to do that don't shame teenagers. Sound, she said. You hate the echo. Soft ceiling panels, rugs that can be cleaned with a stern look. A space where voices don't learn to apologize for being alive, and the chime change it. She smiled. I've been waiting for that. He tapped the panel box he'd coaxed into honesty for weeks. We program a tone that ends warm, a major third resolving to the root. It tells the body you are not about to be punished. That sentence alone might be worth a wing, she murmured. He continued. Services schedule, legal aid, Thursday evenings when people can actually come, job fairs with companies who hire on the spot, a corner staffed by someone who can translate forms, food that isn't an afterthought, coffee that doesn't taste like a dare. And rules, she asked, he thought. 4. No ID required. No questions you don't need to ask. No photographing people's mercy. Leave cleaner and kinder than you arrived. She wrote them exactly as he said them. Then she put the pen down. Co-founder, she said, and the word did not waver. Will you do this with me? Good. She reached into a folder and drew out a draft mission statement. Read, mark, rewrite where I wrote like a person who grew up on agendas. He read, then lifted his eyes. This line, he said, tapping the first paragraph. We welcome those who maintain the building and those who own it. We should flip it. To what? We welcome those who own the building and those who maintain it. Then add on floor 17. Ownership is behavior. The one who cares is the one who belongs. She stared, then nodded. That's the sentence the donors will remember even if they don't admit it. Speaking of donors, he said, Rye, how do we keep this from turning into a cocktail hour with good intentions and bad follow-through? We set a budget that works without applause. She said, we fund operating costs before furniture. We hire a coordinator from inside the building. And we publish a ledger with 3 columns. Dollars in, hours given, doors opened, hours given, he echoed. My father's favorite donation, she said, time that meant it. They worked until the light on 17 looked like morning in a town that remembers its name. At 8:45, Mr. Lawrence arrived, with donuts and a clipboard that had met more thresholds than most people. He listened to the rules, nodded at the chime, and signed his name beneath advisory council with a flourish that made the pen proud. At 9:10, Stan came with papers, articles of incorporation, a bare-bones budget, a list of liability realities dressed in friendly fonts. I brought 2 versions of the charter, he said. One with Ariel as sole founder, one with both names. I recommend the second if you want the story to behave. We don't want a story, Samuel said. We want a room. Same thing if you do it right, Stan replied. Ariel took the pen. Then we sign like the room already exists. They did in the rectangle of light that Eli had once called a prayer. Press Stan asked. There will be questions. Later, Ariel said, the first press release goes to the people who need the room. We can worry about cameras after coffee's hot. Then we'll need a name for the chime, Mr. Lawrence put in. Every good bell has one. Samuel considered. Call it a promise. Ariel nodded. Then programmed the promise. He crossed to the panel and did what he'd been itching to do since the first day. He heard fear bite the tail of the corporate tone, a minute of code, a cautious test. The chime sounded 2 notes clear, the second falling home like a tired traveler finding a porch light. Ariel's eyes shone. That sounds like welcome. Good, he said, because welcome is the only door I want people to remember. Her phone buzzed Delaney. She silenced it. Another buzz. A text from communications asking for language for community initiative. She typed back, it's not an initiative. It's a room draft to follow. She turned to Samuel. After we file, we invite one more person who she held up the child's letter she'd tucked into her portfolio. The girl who taught us how to end a sentence, she said. We asked Diana to draw the first sign on the door. What should it say? He asked, though he knew. Ariel smiled, the kind that kept the promise. We fix. We rise. Samuel exhaled, the kind of breath that carries winter out and leaves room for heat. Then let's wire the past, he said, so the future stops flickering. They stood, side by side, co-founders by law and by need, listening to an elevator tell the story. It should have told all along 2 notes and then a door that would open. The chime rang first, 2 notes clear and human, falling home without hurry. People looked up when they heard it as if some small old part of them had been told, "You're safe. Come in." Floor 17 had been remade in ways that didn't advertise themselves. The light landed warm. The air didn't echo. A long table along the far wall held coffee that didn't taste like penance, and a tray of pastry sourced from a bakery that wrapped things in twine instead of logo. Chairs waited without judging posture. A kid's corner offered crayons and dignity. On the wall beside the newly softened elevator bank, a simple sign hand-lettered by a 10-year-old read, "We fix, we rise." Samuel stood at the edge of the crowd, thumb grazing the compressive wrap beneath his shirt out of habit more than pain. He watched people enter tenants' custodial staff office folk who had never been past the executive floors. A woman with a tote of legal pamphlets and a coat patched carefully at the elbow. Mr. Lawrence floated from guest to guest the way old kindness anchors a room naming greeting stitching. Ariel stepped up to the small riser they'd borrowed from events no grand. Stage, just 2 sound wedges and a microphone with a soft windscreen. She wore a navy suit unadorned, except for a tiny silver pin in the shape of a bell. She didn't tap the mic. She waited until breath conversation and the promised chimes settled into the same rhythm. "Welcome to the Floor 17 Foundation," she said. "We're not launching a brand. We're opening a room." It was a sentence you could set your feet on. The room listened. When my father sketched this floor, she continued, a hand briefly resting on the framed blueprint propped to her right. He wrote, "Bridge the suits and shoes." He meant something simple and subversive. "Buildings are for people, not just plans. Today we begin doing what was drawn and never delivered." She glanced down at her notes, but didn't need them. There are 4 rules on the door. No ID required, no questions you don't need to ask, no photographing people's mercy, leave cleaner and kinder than you arrived. "If you can live with that, this place belongs to you," a murmur went through the crowd. "The good kind, the kind that says a room has remembered its purpose." "I didn't build this alone," Ariel said. "Nothing good worth keeping is built alone." She looked left. Mr. Cross. Samuel joined her on the riser to a ripple of applause he neither chased nor dodged. He stood with the quiet of a keel. "This is my co-founder," Ariel said. "Some of you know him as the man who can coax a machine back to honesty. I know him as the kind of leader most institutions overlook because leadership looks different when it carries a mob." A reporter toward the back began to lift a phone. Mr. Lawrence's glance was gentle and unyielding. The phone found a pocket. Samuel leaned toward the mic. "We fixed the chime," he said, voice steady enough to steady other people. "So, it tells your body you're not about to be punished." A few smiles, he nodded at the blueprint. "This floor will do basic things. Well, hot coffee forms translated into language that breathes a place to sit without apology and services that happen when people can actually come. We'll post a schedule, and if we get something wrong, you tell us, and we'll fix the thing and our tone while we're at it." He stepped back. Ariel returned to the microphone. "Before we open the doors to the legal clinic and job fair, we'd like to honor the people who steady made this possible." She called names. The pro bono counsel who drafted the motion without asking for their logo in the photo. The day porter who spent 2 hours with maintenance, testing the new chime and declaring it less obnoxious than most meetings. The building's union rep who negotiated volunteer hours without asking workers to give what they didn't have. The bakery owner who said yes before hearing the price and said, "Don't worry about it after hearing it." And one more, Ariel said, Mr. Lawrence, who has been holding this building's breath gently for longer than many of us have been breathing. The old doorman raised his cap, eyes bright. "I just keep the door from learning bad habits," he said to a neat ripple of laughter. Ariel glanced to the side of the room where a small figure waited, fidgeting with a bouquet tied in blue ribbon. "Diana, will you join us?" Heads turned. Samuel's breath hitched and found its pace again. His daughter walked with the dignity only children can carry without rehearsing her shoes, clicking a brave metronome on the floor. She wore the blue dress again, then the one with the sparkly belt. But today it looked less like a costume and more like a uniform for joy. She climbed the 2 riser steps, not needing a hand, but taking Ariel's anyway when it was offered. The room gave the quiet children deserve. "For the woman who fixed more than a plan," Diana said into the mic. "Perfectly. Audible, perfectly sure. Thank you for making a bridge." She held out the bouquet. Ariel took it the way someone accepts a medal they didn't seek and can finally admit they needed. "Thank you, Diana," she said. Her voice went soft at the edges. "You wrote a letter once. I want you to know I read it with my whole spine," Diana beamed. "You can borrow my crayons if you need new words." Laughter warm and precise, and Diana added, turning toward Samuel as if he were both a stagehand and star. "Miss Vargas called Dad this morning. She said the judge read the motion. The review hearing is set." She looked back at the room, and for a child did something wildly adult. She let the sentence land without seeking applause. That's all. The cheer rose anyway, not a roar, but a round-held sound, the kind of room makes when it refuses to let one family carry joy alone. Samuel swallowed hard, then let himself clap with everyone else. He felt Ariel's glance find him and hold not possessive, not shy, just an agreement. Ariel returned to the mic. "We'll post the details on the notice board," she said, practical, again. "Now doors open. Legal clinic to the left. Resume table straight ahead. Coffee on the right. Kids corner behind the pillar with the plant that refuses to die." The crowd moved like water that's been shown its path. The promised chime sounded, gently as the elevator let someone else in, and for once no one flinched. The next hour rewrote what Floor 17 remembered. A woman with a grocery badge sat with a Pruno lawyer and learned that wage theft has a name and recourse. A young man in a faded hoodie printed his resume on thick paper and held it like proof he hadn't been imagining himself. An elderly tenant practiced the elevator's new toot chime until her shoulders forgot to lift. The kids' corner became an embassy. Crayons negotiated new flags. Samuel and Ariel moved through the room without choreography, and with perfect timing, he replaced a loose glide on a storage drawer before anyone noticed. She caught a logistics knot at the job table and untied it by asking better questions. Occasionally, they crossed near the blueprint, adjusting tape, straightening corners. No one else had seen go crooked. "Your chime is working," Ariel said, pausing beside him. "So is your budget," he replied. "I've never seen coffee disappear that politely." She smiled. "I filed the articles this morning. We are officially a thing. Then we should do the thing we promised." "What's that?" "Invite the people who never thought this door was for them," he said. He nodded toward a pair of custodians hovering near the threshold, as if entering would redraw a line they'd learned not to cross. Ariel went to them without fanfare, and returned with them smiling coats, open hands warming around cups that didn't ask for names. Good Samuel said that. Baines appeared at the edge of the room as if he'd followed an old instinct toward order and found himself in a new definition of it. He approached with more humility than his tie could stand. "Ms. Hartley Cross," he said. "I came to observe, then observe," Ariel said without sugar or salt. "You'll notice people behaving better when the room behaves first." Baines looked around at the rules posted without threat at Mr. Lawrence. Telling a teenager which donut had the most frosting for scholarly reasons at a woman laughing with a lawyer like laughter was a legal right. His shoulders lowered half an inch. "It's working," he admitted. "It's starting," Samuel corrected. "Working is what we call it when it's still doing this in 6 months. Baines nodded, chastened, and perhaps a little relieved. Near the kids' corner, Diana sat with a smaller boy, struggling to cut paper straight. "Pretend the scissors are a little elevator," she said. "It only goes where you guide it. Don't rush. It gets dizzy." Samuel watched her teach steadiness like it was a family trade. He looked away before pride turned into water. "Samuel," Mr. Lawrence called softly. "Your attention, please." The old man stood near the notice board, one hand on the copper bell he'd brought from the lobby, a retired service bell from a hotel in another decade, buffed until it held light. "A room deserves a sound when words begin," he said. "We have a chime for doors. This is for promises." He looked to Ariel. "Floor 17. Foundation will run weekly," she announced. "Legal clinics Thursdays. Job fairs the last Saturday of every month. Warm room on declared cold snap days." She glanced at Samuel. "And quarterly we host repair school. Samuel teaches tenants the mysteries behind the panels." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "You volunteered me." "I recognized your calling," she said, unapologetic. "I'll teach," he said, "as long as the first lesson is how to listen before you turn a screw." "Perfect," she said. Mr. Lawrence struck the bell a small, resonant note that didn't compete with the promise chime, but stood beside it like a friend. People clapped, then just stayed, not out of obligation, but because a room that welcomes is a room that lingers. The moment that would be photographed, even though no phones were up, happened near the end. Someone asked for a picture for the newsletter, and Mr. Lawrence, breaking the third rule, only in spirit, arranged it with the care of a man setting a table for First Communion. "Stand there," he said to Ariel by the blueprint. "Samuel, here were the tape puckers." Diana middle because middle holds. They stood not posed, but placed. Ariel with the bouquet Diana had given her Samuel with a smudge of machine oil near his cuff that had refused eraser Diana with ink on her fingers from the signs she'd lettered behind them. "We fix, we rise," and overhead the soft lights that made faces honest. No shutter clicked. No flash told them to blink. But everyone in the room saw 3 people in a line that felt like an answer to a question no one had dared to ask aloud. Not a declaration, not a performance, just a picture the heart takes when it recognizes home. The promise chime sounded again. Doors opened. People moved through out to jobs, to buses, to cold air that felt less like punishment and more like a place between rooms. Ariel turned to Samuel. "We did a thing," she said, voice close to wonder. "We started one," he said. Diana tugged his sleeve. "Can we come back every Thursday? We live here now," Samuel said, and realized it was true in more ways than one. They stepped down from the riser. The sign on the wall caught the light again, plain and defiant. "We fix, we rise." It wasn't just a sentence anymore. It was a practice with a room to keep it honest. They opened the hoistway at dawn when the tower's heartbeat was quiet enough to hear a new one begin. The old car had been craned out weeks earlier. What rose in its place looked less like a machine than a decision. Satin brushed steel, a handrail, of warm oak that asked for touch, not permission. Lighting trimmed to a soft ellipse that made faces kinder without lying about the hour. Samuel stood in the pit with a torque wrench and a patience earned on longer nights. "Lower half an inch," he called to the rigger above. The counterweight murmured. The car settled that last delicate sigh of metal finding home. A city inspector in a wool coat and practical boots watched clipboard tucked beneath her arm like a skeptical bird. "You've overbuilt your safety margin," she said, not disapproving. Samuel didn't look up. "I've recalibrated where my margin lives," she smirked. "Engineers call that religion. I call it a pass pending your door sensor test." He gave her the half-smile of a man who respected scrutiny. "We'll make the sensors jealous of how reliable they are." On the landing, Mr. Lawrence wiped a non-existent smudge from the call button with a folded handkerchief older than half the staff. Ariel waited beside him, hairpinned coat unbuttoned against a morning that finally felt less like punishment. The plaque in her hands was simple brushed brass hand engraved last night by a sign maker on the South Branch who charged less than he should have and cried more than he meant to when he read the words. "We fix, we rise, S and D, cross, cross." "Ready?" she asked. Samuel climbed out of the pit, rolled his shoulder once habit now more than hurt, and took the plaque. He ran his thumb along the bevel as one might graze a name on an old stone. "She'll like her jewelry," he said. The inspector cleared her throat. "Sensor test first, then adornment." "Door," Samuel called to the tech at the control panel. "Cycle. Open. Close. Slow. Run." The doors slid apart with a sound you could mistake for breathing. A light curtain traced invisible lines. Samuel held a folded cloth into the gap. The car refused to close, respectful as a gentleman at a threshold. Again. Again. No stutter, no ghost tripping the relay. "Run," he said. The car nudged upward exactly as far as requested, then stopped as if obeying a promise. The inspector scribbled, then dotted her note with an emphatic period. "It's rare," she said, tone grudgingly warm, "to see a car that behaves like it knows who's riding." "Doors remember hands," Samuel said. "She'll remember ours." Ariel stepped forward with the screws of the small driver, the ceremonial gravity of someone affixing a truth to steel. Samuel centered the plaque beneath the panel perfectly level without a spirit gauge. He had an instinct for where things should rest and drove the first screw home. The metal carried the sound like a bell that had decided to agree. "Nice letters," the inspector murmured. "Who's D-Cross?" Ariel answered, before either pride or sadness could rearrange Samuel's mouth. "His daughter," she said. "She taught us the second half." The inspector nodded. Unexpected tenderness finding its way into a bureaucrat's morning. "Sign here," she said, tapping the final line. "Certification." She looked at Samuel. "You want the first ride?" Mr. Lawrence tipped his cap. Tradition says the owner goes first. He offered Ariel the new key card, a ceremonial gesture only. The car didn't need it anymore, but this one was built by a man who understands gravity. "I say, let gravity choose." "Gravity chooses both," Ariel said softly. "We ride together." The inspector pressed the door release. The promise chime. 2 notes clear the second landing like a foot finding a familiar stair sounded. They stepped in. The cabin held 4 and the space between them. The floor was a forgiving rubber with a pattern that wanted to be snow if snow were warm. Above the handrail, a narrow panel of matte bronze reflected just enough faces softened into shapes that could be anyone's. Ariel ran her fingertips along the oak. "Light that keeps its promises," she murmured almost to herself and then glanced up. "What does she ask first?" Samuel tapped the panel. "She asks where you want to go." He pointed to the new button labeled 17, foundation in a font that looked like plain speech. "I moved this one higher on the stack." He added a small defiance disguised as ergonomics. "It's a habit worth building." Rialel pressed 17. The doors closed with intention, not haste. The car began to rise steady as breath, the faintest hum of willingness. No lurch, no swallowed syllables at the end of the chime. The city slid along the seam where doors met frame, a band of shadow, a band of light, then resolved into the landing they had remade to welcome instead of warn. "They didn't step out again," Ariel said. He sent them down to the lobby and back a liturgy. The inspector rode once, made a mark, and stepped off with brisk satisfaction and something she would later call to her sister and describe without intending to as beautiful. On the 4th run, they rode alone. The car moved. They didn't speak until silence finished writing the first paragraph of a new chapter. "When my father took me to the top after hours," Ariel said at last, "eyes on the seam," he made me promise 2 things. Never use height to feel bigger than the people below, and never ride alone when you can ride beside. Samuel looked at the little brass plate at the initials that had widened the corridor of his life. "I thought doors were my vocabulary," he said. "Turns out this one is grammar." "We both rewrote sentences," she said. The car stopped at 17. They stayed in the cabin as if worship required another minute. "Samuel," she said, and his name in her mouth had stopped being a surprise. It was a place. "Tell me the truth without protecting me. Did I make this about atonement?" "You made it about repair," he said. "Atonement counts what we owe. Repair counts who can stand after we're done." She nodded, a kind of relief-freeing muscle you didn't know was tight. "Good. Because I don't want a shrine. I want a hallway that leads out." "We built one," he said simply. From the landing, the faint sound of children negotiating crayons reached them. A woman's laugh. Mr. Lawrence's voice, that gentle bell, saying someone's name like a spelling lesson. Ariel pressed L. They descended, halfway down. She drew a breath and let the room notice it. "There's something else," she said, the tone that precedes a door opening. "Stan believes the judge will grant unsupervised visitation. He's never promised anything that firmly." She didn't touch him. She set the sentence beside him like a cup of water within reach. "And when they ask who you are in this child's life, I want to say a sentence that is true both in court and out. He is the man who built the elevator that doesn't abandon you." Samuel kept his eyes on the panel. The lobby number lit, then dimmed as the car slowed with a grace that seemed almost impolite to interrupt. "Whatever the judge says," he answered carefully. "I don't step off the job." That's the oath. The doors parted. The lobby waited, marble corrected with warmth. Winter sun folding itself into the atrium. From a florist's cart already selling mercy, by the stem. Poorly dressed. Good news. That's how the morning felt. Ariel reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a slim envelope cream with a narrow blue border. "This is for Diana," she said. "It's not from my office. It's from me." He raised an eyebrow. She drew the sign. She started the chime. "It seems wrong to tell a child the system hurt her and not tell her I did." She placed the envelope in his palm, careful to touch nothing else. "Please read it first." "I will," he said, tucking it inside his jacket as if the place over his heart were designed for deliveries that mattered. "And if you don't want your name to complicate, if complication is the price of saying thank you to a child," she said, "we're rich." Mr. Lawrence approached, holding 2 paper cups with the lids that snapped down like contentment. "Rode like a hymn," he announced. "Fewer false notes than some choirs I've met." Past the inspector called already halfway to the service stairs, voice echoing back like an official benediction. "Tag and file. She's yours." Ariel turned to Samuel. "One more ride?" she said. "Where to nowhere?" she said, mouth tilting. "Just up and not stuck." They stepped back inside. The doors closed soft. Sure. The promised chime spoke its 2 honest notes. She stood nearer than policy would advise and farther than presumption would ask. Their reflections in the bronze panel looked like 2 people the same height in the only measure that counts. "Do you know the best thing about a well-built elevator?" she asked. "That it behaves when no one's watching. That it teaches you to trust motion," she said, "not announcements." The car rose between floors where fear once had taken its deep breath. There was only the hum of a system calibrated to kindness. When they stopped at 17 again, neither reached for the door. They did not need to. It opened. She turned to him, eyes steady in a way that would have frightened her 5 winters ago. "I won't look away," she said. He met her gaze. "Neither will I." Outside the cabin, the sign waited on the wall, catching the light as if it had practiced. "We fix. We rise." Inside, the 2 notes of the chime faded into a tone you feel more than hear the quiet a room makes when it finally believes you. They stepped out together. The world did not applaud because the world did not need to. The elevator did what it was made to do: carry weight without complaint, return, and never, never trap the people who trusted it. Dear Judge, I know my dad doesn't wear a suit or talk fancy, but he's the strongest man I know, and he fixed more than an elevator. He fixed her heart. Diana's handwriting sat there on the copy before the bench, small, brave, legible as daylight. The courtroom was one of those quiet rooms where wood remembers every story it's heard. Snow feathered the courthouse windows. A radiator clicked softly, keeping time with nerves. Judge Maraman read the paragraph again, slower this time, as if the words asked not to be rushed. "Miss Vargas," he said at last, looking to the guardian ad litem, "you've reviewed the home conditions and the employment stability." "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Cross holds 2 jobs now consolidated toward predictable hours. He has consistent housing and a verified support network. His discipline during emergencies is documented. The child is safe with him." The judge turned to Samuel. "Mr. Cross, anything you'd like to add, Samuel?" Rose, hands at his sides. "Only this, Your Honor. I came in breathing. I'll leave breathing. And in between, I'll stay useful for my daughter. A ripple the kind a room makes when it recognizes a sentence that will not age." The judge nodded once. "The court grants unsupervised visitation weekly, beginning immediately. Sundays 10 to 6, and additional time as schedules allow by mutual agreement. We'll review in 3 months, but I expect to find what I see today: steadiness." He tapped his pen, then smiled toward the front bench. "And for the record, this letter," he lifted Diana's page, "is not evidence of anything but heart. That said, courtrooms do better when they remember what heart sounds like." Samuel sat slowly. Air returned to his ribs as if someone had opened a window. Ariel didn't move, but her shoulders lowered the way winter lowers when it decides to be kind. Diana squeezed Samuel's fingers under the rail and whispered, "Pancakes." "Every Sunday," he whispered back. Outside, Chicago exhaled snow. The courthouse steps had been salted into a careful path. They stood together at the top. Ariel, Samuel, Diana watching the city accept another storm without complaint. Diana tucked her scarf higher and looked up at them with the urgency of a child who knows exactly what should happen next. "Can I run ahead and tell Mr. Lawrence?" she asked. Samuel nodded. "Don't slip. Tell him the judge listened first and decided last." She laughed and darted down the steps, purple hat bobbing like a small lantern. Silence settled a good kind, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled. Ariel looked at Samuel as if she were memorizing not his face, but the steadiness behind it. "You did it," she said. "We did what was asked," he answered. Then the door opened. She reached for his hand without ceremony. No announcement, no pose. 10 honest fingers meeting 10 honest fingers in falling snow. They began to walk. No destination. More complicated than forward. The city blurred into soft edges around them. "You once told me you schedule feelings," Samuel said, a smile, tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I canceled some meetings," she replied. "I kept this one." They passed a bakery window fogged with warmth, a bus stop, where strangers stood shoulder to shoulder under a common roof, a florist's cart making color where the day was gray. No one stopped them. No one needed to. It was not a secret. It was simply not a performance. At H. Hartley Tower, the lobby lights held their quiet gold. Mr. Lawrence was already at the door cap lifted high. The building heard, he said, as if that were a technical report. "May I be the first civilian to say about time?" "You may," Samuel said. Diana burst in behind him, snow on her eyelashes, triumph in her breath. He said, "Sundays and maybe Thursdays. If homework is a good citizen, then Thursdays will learn their manners," Samuel said. Ariel brushed a flake from Diana's hat. "You kept your promise," she murmured. "So did you." the girl replied, as if that were the easier part. They moved toward the elevator together. The plaque beneath the panel caught a slant of light. We fix. We rise. S and D cross. Not loud, not shy, exactly where it belonged. Diana pressed the button with ceremonial precision. The doors parted. Oak waited for hands. They stepped in, the three of them, fitting easily like a sentence that had found its right words. 17? Ariel asked. Lobby to 17, Samuel said, then back. Again, just to hear how quiet the promise is. The chime gave its two clear notes. The car began to rise. No shudder, no swallow at the tail, only the kind of emotion the body trusts without thinking about it. Through the seam where the doors met, the floors slipped by like pages turning themselves. Diana leaned into Samuel's side and watched the numbers glow and fade. It's like it's breathing, she whispered. It is, he said. So are we. At 17, the doors opened onto the room they'd made into a small, orderly kind of mercy. Legal pamphlets stacked square, chairs angled for conversation, a child's drawing on the notice board, an elevator with a smile and a speech bubble that said, "Up, please." They didn't step out. Some moments asked for stillness more than arrival. Again, Diana said softly. Samuel pressed the button. The car descended, then rose, this time with no sound at all, but the gentlest hum like a heart, remembering its job and refusing drama. Ariel watched the panel numbers, and without looking away, spoke the kind of sentence that becomes a place to stand. Whatever the world says, we will not leave each other in the dark. Samuel nodded. We leave breathing, he said, and we leave together. The elevator moved, and there was nothing to fear in its motion. Outside, snow kept stitching the day to the evening. Inside, three people held the kind of quiet that makes future possible. When the doors finally closed again, the camera you couldn't see would have caught nothing loud, only a cabin gliding upward without a rattle, without a single complaint, as if the metal itself had learned patience. And above the seam, in that small band where shadow meets light, the city seemed to agree. Mended things, when kept with care, don't squeak. They carry. Sometimes the most powerful changes don't come with grand speeches or sudden miracles, but with quiet hands fixing what's broken and hearts learning how to rise together. If this story touched you, I'd love to know where in the world are you listening from right now. Your voice, your city, your story. They all matter here. And if you want to join me for more journeys filled with hope, healing, and the kind of love that stays, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next chapter. Thank you truly. Thank you for spending your time here with me today. Until our next story, may your days be warm, your steps be steady, and may you always find an elevator that takes you higher.